International Commercial Disputes Prevention and Settlement Organization of CCPIT. And thirdly, the Belt and Road Committee of the Bar Council of Malaysia. We also would like to express our deepest appreciation to our sponsors, Jingchen, Tongda, and New Law Firm in China, and also the Hong Kong Law Society. Now, a little bit of background about this webinar. Originally, we wanted to hold a Belt and Road Initiative session at the Law Asia Annual Conference in Sydney to be held later this year from the 18th of November to the 21st of November in Sydney. But unfortunately, because China is still under lockdown, many of our committee members will not be able to travel to Australia. Hence, we decided to organize this webinar so that our friends from China, as well as from 146 countries around the world that supports the Belt and Road Initiative, can support and attend this conference, this webinar. At this moment, the world is facing unprecedented challenges and changes, including the COVID-19 pandemic, droughts and floods from climate change, as well as the Ukraine crisis. Many countries along the Belt and Road are slowly recovering. Some are still under lockdowns, for example, in China, but we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So this session will allow us to update ourselves because there's a shortage of information on what is happening to the Belt and Road Initiative in the various countries, partly because of the COVID pandemic that has caused many lockdowns and delays in the projects and in the investments in all these countries. So today is a good session for us to come and share information and also to answer any of your questions. At the same time, apart from our session one, which will cover the economic situation and investment situation in our respective Belt and Road countries, session two will cover dispute resolution and issues arising from delayed projects and construction disputes. I will next call upon our president of Law Asia, Melissa Pang, to give us an opening speech. Melissa is the president of Law Asia and also a partner with Pang and Associates. She is the immediate past president of the Law Society of Hong Kong and has been serving as a Law Society Council member since 2005. I will now call upon Melissa to give the opening speech. Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you. Distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good day. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the Law Asia One Belt, One Road Committee webinar. It's very encouraging to know that today over 350 participants from 36 jurisdictions are joining us to collaborate and to inspire each other. Law Asia is the regional law association of lawyers, judges, jurists, and legal organizations. We represent and advocate for the interests of the legal profession in the Asia-Pacific region. With over 50 leading bar associations and legal organizations spanning across over 40 jurisdictions in Asia and Pacific region, majority of our members are in the Belt and Road countries. We work together to solve challenges facing the region, and we encourage as our core value adherence to the principle of the rule of law, access to justice, and the protection of human rights. As mentioned by the co-chair Jack, over the past few years, the world is facing unprecedented challenges. The world economy also suffers a lot because of the Ukraine crisis, disruption of global supply chain, surging prices of bulk commodities, and uncertainty of global financial systems. Belt and Road Initiative, which advocate for global connectivity, construction of infrastructure and communication facilities, echoes with the objective of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Collaboration along the Belt and Road should be facilitated, not only as a response to post-pandemic recovery, but also as recoupling measures for supply chains and renewal of sustainable development. Here, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the sponsors and supporting organizations for their continuous support to Law Asia. Namely, the International Commercial Dispute Prevention and Settlement Organization, the Subcommittee on Belt and Road of the Malaysian Bar Council International Professional Service Committee, and also the Law Society of Hong Kong, Jin Cheng, Tong Da, and New Law Firm. But last but not the least, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Yin Bao Hu and Jeff Leung, the two co-chairs of Law Asia Belt and Road Committee, for their effort and dedication in making this webinar possible and a success. I hope all of you will enjoy the webinar, and I'm certain you will find the event informative and rewarding. I look forward to welcoming you at the Sydney 35th Law Asia Conference. The date is sometime this November. I look forward to seeing you all in Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I will now call upon Mr. Stephen Peng, Senior Partner of Jin Cheng Tong Da and New Law Firm, to give his speech on behalf of the sponsors.
Thank you, Jeff. Distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Stephen Peng from Jin Cheng Tong Da New Law Firm in China. It's a long name, so you can call our law firm JTN Law Firm. I would like to start by thanking the Law Asia One Belt One Road Committee for hosting this webinar. JTN Law Firm, as the sponsor of this webinar, is glad to meet so many outstanding legal practitioners here. I noticed that our speakers today are all experienced experts in transnational transactions and cross-border legal issues. I believe that we can hear more insights later from the perspective of post-pandemic recovery and sustainable development. JTN Law Firm is specialized in cross-border trade and investment, representing both Chinese companies and Chinese government. We believe international law practitioners can contribute to the post-pandemic recovery and sustainable development with their knowledge and experiences, not only in their domestic laws, but also international trade and investment agreements, including the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RECP, which officially took effect in January this year. The RCEP members include several BRI countries where many of our speakers come from. The BRI countries have demonstrated and will demonstrate their strong vitality and development potentiality. I believe that this webinar will help us to understand better the way to cooperate with each other and to cope with legal issues in the post-pandemic sustainable development. I hope to see more insightful and fruitful exchanges today. Thank you very much. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Peng, for your kind words on behalf of the sponsor. We will now start our first session. I will start off this session first. There will be 5 of us, each of us speaking for 8 minutes. Let me share my screen. Okay, I will give you a brief update about sustainable Belt and Road development in Malaysia. Now, what is the state of the economy over here in Malaysia, especially the Belt and Road projects here in Malaysia? After 2 years of pandemic, Malaysia also has political uncertainty because we have 3 changes of prime ministers and 2 changes of government. And we are expected to hold our general election sometime at the end of this year or early next year. So Malaysia is still going through some changes. But at this moment, when we recovered, we reopened our economy, the this year's GDP is going to exceed 6% for the first time in 8 years. And also the GDP growth for the second quarter is 8.9%. Compared to other jurisdictions, it seems to be doing well. I think this is pent-up demand. This is the fact that Malaysia is has been locked down for such a long time, and there are things that needs to be done, and finally things got underway. At the same time, because of the weakness in our currency, I think more investments are also coming in, and we are definitely looking forward towards next year. With a change of government or new government in place, there will be more certainty for foreign investors to direct their investments to Malaysia. At the same time, Belt and Road Initiative projects to take off in a better way. Now, the status of the Belt and Road Initiative projects in Malaysia, the most important one is ECRL, the East Coast Rail Link. This one has been closed down for quite a bit during the movement control orders during the pandemic. And fortunately, we are now able to restart. And according to the Minister of Transport, Datuk Sri Dr. Wee Ka Siong, the link that comes from the East Coast, Kota Baru, near Thailand, to Gombak, which is near Kuala Lumpur, will be completed by January 1st, 2027. So it is in progress. Why is this East Coast Rail Link important? This East Coast Rail Link is important because it connects the Straits of Malacca, the port Klang in the Straits of Malacca, to Kuantan, which is the Malaysian port on the South China Sea. And there is a twin industrial park called the Malaysia Kuantan Industrial Park, as well as the China-Malaysia Qinzhou Industrial Park in Qinzhou over in Guangxi. So this connects Straits of Malacca to South China Sea and connects to the Belt and Road links over at Qinzhou to the rest of China, as well as through China to Central Asia to Europe. So this is in progress and coming along. Now, at the same time, many of you have heard that Malaysia, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, decisions were made to cancel the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail. And with the latest Prime Minister being in charge now, there's talk that we will now revive the Singapore-Kuala Lumpur high-speed rail to connect it to the Bangkok high-speed rail as well. So, as you know, the high-speed rail from Yunnan to Laos has already been opened. The Laos to Bangkok rail is also in progress, under construction. So it is hoped that by reviving the Singapore-Kuala Lumpur high-speed rail link, and also from Kuala Lumpur to link it to Bangkok, there will be finally a complete network of high-speed rails all the way from China through Laos, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur to Singapore. So this is being discussed at this point in time. I think because of the pandemic and the need for projects to try and kickstart the economy again, so this project will see the light of day, hopefully very soon next year. So this is more information about the high-speed rail from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore that has been suspended. Now, the other interesting proposal, this stems to previous discussions by President Jokowi of Indonesia, where he mentioned that and he would like to see either a bridge being built across the Straits of Malacca from Sumatra to Kuala Lumpur or to West Malaysia. So at this moment, both countries are now studying 120-kilometer tunnel or bridge from Malacca to Dumai, which is the nearest point in Sumatra to Indonesia. So again, according to the planners for this project, it is inspired by the One Belt, One Road concept, and both Malaysia and Indonesia will work on this project, and hopefully we could get funding as well as support from China's construction companies to assist in this project. So these are the recent changes in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia. Now, the Malaysian government has also committed to support a climate change initiative. We will have, in the 12 Malaysian plan, we would be a carbon neutral country by 2050 at the earliest. So various initiatives has been put into place. There's a commitment to no new coal power plants. So future infrastructure projects, including power plants, we will look towards probably oil and gas, maybe solar and other renewable energy as a form of generating power in Malaysia. The other aspects of these climate change initiatives include, for example, renewable energy generation, which is of interest to our investors from China, Belt and Road investors from China. There's also an emission trading scheme that is being put together, as well as developing electric vehicle technology and energy efficient vehicles. China is, of course, the world's largest producer of such vehicles, and we look towards investments from China to make this happen in Malaysia. So these are the key national policies and blueprints. Those that affect the Belt and Road projects will be Green Technology Master Plan. So, for example, if you look at this, this plan covers building sector, water sector, transportation sector, and energy sector, all of which are Belt and Road Initiative projects. So any companies that undertake this sort of construction and the development of Belt and Road projects in these fields will need to comply with the Green Technology Master Plan. Then there's also a National Construction Policy 2030. So again, this has to be complied with. So this National Construction Policy, for example, focus on developing quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure, developing environmental friendly design to conserve and preserve nature, and promote environmental friendly construction materials, and strengthen the waste management system. So some of these policies will definitely influence how new Belt and Road projects are being put together in Malaysia in the coming years. I will now end here and see if you have any questions later on. Let me stop share. Okay, I will now introduce our next speaker from Kazakhstan, Mr. Sanza Amangeldi. He's a partner with Unique Case Law Firm. His practice is in commercial and business law, M&A, project management, labor law, antitrust, construction, energy, crypto, and IT law. So I will now call upon Mr. Sanza to give us his presentation. Over to you, Sanza.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet everyone. Can you share my presentation, please, if it's possible? I've sent it before. Hello? Hello?
Is it?
Because I have problems with my computer and I'm broadcasting from the phone. So if it's possible, would you mind to?
Okay, why don't we do this? I think if the secretariat is not able to do it immediately, why don't we now call upon the next speaker to speak first while we get your PPT ready.
Sure.
Now the next speaker is Mr. Nguyen Bao Tri Alphonse from Vietnam. He will speak to us about the resolution on sustainable development in Vietnam. Alphonse is a partner, senior partner of GLPW Win An Legal in Vietnam. Over to you, Alphonse.
邮件里有没有他的是吧？啊，看看邮件里有没有他的。叫三者还是叫什么
Hi, can you hear me?
？Yes.
All right. Can you see my my slides well, right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So thank you for the brief introduction. First of all, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants from different jurisdictions. Well, in the past 5 years, the world faced many challenges and changes, including the trade war, COVID-19 pandemic, and interruption of the world economy caused by Ukraine crisis. So Vietnam, as many other countries, also badly affected in the past years. However, thanks to Vietnam's strong economic fundamentals, decisive containment measures, and well-targeted government support, Vietnam economy has remained resilient. So this is the key contents for today. I would like, firstly, introduce you the common goals that United Nations 2030 Agenda and Belt and Road Initiative have for the sustainable development. And then I will discuss on the resolution which Vietnam has implemented to facilitate the industry sector with the strong foreign investment to sustain the country economy. So, well, to deal with such uncertainty and change, as mentioned earlier, UN member states adopted a global agenda in September 2015, so-called Agenda for Sustainable Development. As we can see on the screen, there are 17 goals set out by the UN, and which can be divided in 3 different aspects: economic, social, and environmental. Today, I will share with you an example of goal number 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So why the goal number 9? Because industry is a very important sector, which Vietnam government has implemented different policies and regulations to ensure manufacturing industry is the driving force for the economic sustainable development of a country. Also, industry will lift up the country economy by increase of productivity, job creations, and generate income.
梁柏林说一下准备好。
Contribute to poverty eradication, as well as providing the opportunity for social inclusions, including the gender equality, empowering women and girls, and creating decent employment for the next young generations. In line with the 2030 Belt and Road Initiative, Belt and Road Initiative has been the multinational projects having the priority, objective, overlaps, and associated with the Global Sustainable Development Framework. So this initiative actually have addressed the goal number 17, which is the partnership for the goals. A good example is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, a multilateral development bank that aims to improve the economic and social outcome in Asia. Therefore, 2030 Agenda and the BRI can generate many strengths, the opportunities among stakeholders. So in this presentation, I would like to share with you of how Vietnam has focused on the industrializations for sustainable development of the country. As a socialist republic country, on the policy and law of Vietnam is passed by the Central Committee and National Congress in every 5 years. The year 2020 marked a significant timeline for Vietnam as it being a final year of the 5-year plan of the period from 2016 to 2020. And we all witnessed the 2020 pandemic. And this is an opportunity for Vietnam government to rethink the path of economic growth and importance of sustainable development. So in this context, the government issues the Resolution 136 to promote the sustainable development goals from 2020 to 2030. Especially the objective and targets of these resolutions is also focused on the goal number 9. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrializations, and foster renovation. So in 2020, the Vietnamese government also approved Resolution 115 to promote Vietnam's support industry, giving us specific goals for the sector, such as ensuring high level of competitiveness in the next decades. So reported by the Ministry of Planning and Investment, by the end of September 2021, there are 397 industrial zones established with a total natural land of 122,000 hectares. So regarding the labor situation, This report also pointed out that regardless of the pandemic, industrial zone in the whole country in 2021 have created jobs for about 4 million workers, an increase tremendously of 90,000 employees compared to the end of the 2020 COVID pandemic years. So another resolution I would like to mention here is number 39, with the goal is that by 2030, Vietnam will increase the share of industry GDP to over 40% in the next 10 years. The planning of industrial parkland area is expected to reach 205,800 hectares. So according to the whole country, by then we'll have 558 industrial parks. So in fact, Vietnam development of industrial zones has recent years shown our commitment and actively preparing infrastructure under spirit of Belt and Road Initiative to welcome the wave of FDI from foreign enterprises. So together with the preparations for infrastructure, as mentioned earlier, from 2007 until now, within 15 years, Vietnam has made a big stride on the path of international integrations and confidently joining the global playground. So to understand the better Vietnam policy of international integrations, so let us travel back to the year 2007, a remarkable year for Vietnam. After 11 years of negotiation, we as a Vietnam country officially became a member of WTO. So this significant step for Vietnam integrating the world trade and subsequently entering into the several different free trade agreements in the regions. And we can see the FDI amount in 2005 was 4.58 billion US dollar. The amount subsequently increased to 16 billion US dollar in 2016 and 38 billion US dollar in 2019. So by now, there are total 15 free trade agreements Vietnam has signed and already took effect. Besides the reduced tariff and set trade rules, this also
you should be ending your speech soon.
So consider, all the new generation of FTA. Vietnam has amended the law, including in law on investment, law on enterprises, and order to make our business environment more competitiveness and more transparency. So other factor to attract more foreign investment, including tax incentive, as mentioned here, and we can send you the slide for your further consideration. So to conclude my presentation, I would say that Vietnam has remained its focus on industrializations for the economic sustainable development, and to do so, different resolutions has been implemented to preserve the land for manufacturing industry and to attract foreign investor in the years to come. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you, Alphonse, for your introduction on the situation in Vietnam. We will next turn to Kazakhstan, to our speaker from Kazakhstan, Mr. Sanza Amangeldi. He's a partner at Unicase Law Firm, and his practice is on in the areas of commercial and business law, M&A, project management, labor law, and antitrust, construction, energy, crypto, and IT law. Over to you, Mr. Amangeldi, for your speech on Kazakhstan.
Hi, everyone. Hello?
Mr. Amangeldi, yeah.
Hello. Yeah, it's my pleasure, everyone. Let's start with the first slide. And in the meantime, I'll tell I'm working at I'm a partner at Unicase Law Firm. It's the regular participant of Legal 500, Chambers, Asia Law, and IFLR 1000, and especially in M&A and energy spheres, as well as the dispute resolution. So let's start with the first slide. Next one, please. As you all know, the Strategic Belt and Road Initiative, BRI of China, has multifunctional significance, and BRI was called like New Silk Way. And for currently, it's like China has already spent more than 200 billion and intends to invest even more. And Morgan Stanley is like forecasted that BRI budget could reach up to the 1.3 trillion dollars by 2027. As you know, it's like it's a tremendous numbers. And currently, 140 states has already signed BRI agreement, and Kazakhstan is also one of those states. Please, next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you know, in 2013, Kazakhstan became one of the first nations to support the BRI. The Central Asian region is one of the key areas in this initiative. It is important to know that Chinese President, Mr. Xi Jinping, chose the capital of Kazakhstan to announce such significant initiative. He took into account Kazakhstan's important role in the process of reviving the Great Silk Road. And to support this initiative, he has also presented the first and the national program called Nurly Zhou, which focuses on the main goals of BRI. It is important to mention that Kazakhstan is a favorable location for because it's located in the middle of the continent of Eurasian continent between China and Europe. So over the past 10 years, Kazakhstan has invested more than $30 billion into development of the infrastructure, transport, logistics, and other things. It's like 3,000 kilometers of national railways and 15,000 kilometers of highways have been modernized. Domestic sea and air harbors were constructed also. For Kazakhstan, Europe and China are connected and with a high quality intercontinental highway, Western Europe and Western China. And also the Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Iran-Persian Gulf Railway is gaining momentum. Every year, the seaports of Aktau and Kurik handle 6.5 million tons of transit cargo and more than 50,000 containers, sufficient distribution of railway freight traffic on the Kazakh-Chinese border. The territory of Kazakhstan is crossed by 11 transcontinental routes, 5 railroads and 6 roads. So it's like Kazakhstan is trying to develop according to the plan, to the Nurly Zhou and BRI initiative. And for the sake of this, Kazakhstan has also presented the new jurisdiction in Kazakhstan. It's called Astronaut International Financial Center. It's a financial center where the jurisdiction is English. So it's like it is acting in accordance with the separate law, which is higher than the local law, and there's like the jurisdiction is English. So currently there are like 1,200 registered companies in the AFC, and it's like many different countries presented here. It's like as for my knowledge, there's like 60 different countries, companies from the 60 different countries around the world, and the numbers are getting higher each year. So so what AIFC offers is the most successful solution for the technologies used by international financial centers. And sorry, could you go back? I didn't finish yet. Yeah, thank you. So first, like the different things in the IFC, first of all, is like a financial hub for the whole country, and it's gonna bring the new initiatives in the technological development of Kazakhstan. It provides the opportunity to the IT companies to grow and to go to another level, as well as the also is like in order to promote the zero carbon policy in Kazakhstan. Astana International Financial Center has also presented the Astana Green Finance. So it's like green companies also can come here and enjoy some benefits and state incentives. Next slide, please. So for the sake of implementation of BRI, Kazakh government developed its very own strategy in Nurlejo, as I said before, in 2015. And recently, Kazakh government has adopted a new version of the Nurlejo strategy, 2020, 2025. And the total amount of funding for the new state program until 2025 is 6,598 billion tenge, which is equal to $16 billion, of which 58% are funds from the Republican budget, 11 from the funds from the local budgets, 26 from the mechanism of public and private partnership and private investments. 5% are own funds of the national and state companies. So with regard to the business, we think, next slide.
Sanza, you should take 1 minute to complete your presentation.
With regard to the business, we think that in order to participate in BRI related projects, Chinese and international companies needs to develop trust and partnership with local business and organizations, cultivate legal regulatory expertise and comprehend all the risks which are connected with the political and social scope. BRI is still far from its end because the coronavirus pandemic around the world led BRI development to slow down. And Russia-Ukraine war also brings its issues to the table and impacts on BRI, the results of which are incomprehensible now. And countries are more focused on current problems, making it difficult to encompass the entire the geopolitical and geoeconomic situation. However, I truly believe that implementation of BRI will allow to globally reformat trade and economic process to turn infrastructure integration to the benefits of the country like Kazakhstan. For Kazakhstan, whose foreign and economic policies were based on principle of multi-vector approach and openness to constructive cooperation with neighboring countries and the world community at the dawn of independence. Active participation in BRI is natural and logical. That's it for today. Sorry for my speech. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for your presentation on behalf of Kazakhstan. We look forward to visiting Kazakhstan again. I've now called upon our next speaker from Indonesia, Mr. Johannes Sahatapi Angel. He's the founding partner of Exat Law Offices in Indonesia. Johannes has advised clients in a multitude of industries, mergers, acquisitions, financings, and complex transactions, including on building and operating renewable energy power plants across Indonesia. So now I call upon Johannes to give us a status report on Indonesia, the Belt and Road project. Over to you, Johannes.
Hi, thank you, Jeff. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, participants. It's nice to see you all on a Saturday. Let me see if I can share my screen. Jeff is giving me an 8-minute slot. So it won't be enough to go through all the slides, but let's just go through this quickly. You can see the screen, yeah? Okay. Okay. The government of Indonesia, like other governments, now try to provide some incentives and benefits for companies following the pandemic. Now, admittedly, those are not specifically designed for in relation to BRI, but all investors, including investors from China, would also enjoy that. There are the benefits or incentives are provided in depending on the sectors, and also there are incentives that are given more general to all companies. Okay, in the capital markets, the OJK, or the Financial Services Authority, has given some leeways or some flexibility to listed companies in complying with their obligations under the capital markets law and the OJK rules and regulations given the pandemic. So you can see in the slides later on what the incentives given, like the extension for a company to submit their reports, and there are certain things about simplification of the procedures to hold the GMS, or general meeting of shareholders, and all those incentives. That's for the capital markets. In banking, the government through Bank Indonesia also provide some recovery measures or assistance for banks. They now could restructure loans to the individuals who may have suffered or experienced difficulty in servicing their loans, and the banks are now given some incentives to restructure these non-performing loans. Okay. Non-bank financial service institutions are also given some incentives as well. They also are allowed to restructure the non-performing loans from their customers. So these are the incentives given by the OJK for financial service institutions or finance service companies. For income tax, now this applies to all companies. The government has, at the outset of the pandemic, the government gave a discount, or a discount for companies in making their monthly income taxes. In Indonesia, companies are required to pay their annual income tax for the next year in installments based on the amount of their income tax in the previous year. That amount is divided into 12, and it's paid every month. Given the at the outset of the pandemic, the government would allow companies in certain industries to have a 50% discount of the monthly income tax installments, which would be a great help for many companies. The regulation was renewed recently in 2022, but the listed industries that are allowed to enjoy this discount or exemption has been reduced, but it's still there. There are certain incentives for Article 22 import income tax as well. There's some incentive as well there. Okay, these are the sort of summary of what the incentives are. Everyone could see that. I'll provide this to the secretariat in due course. Tax holidays, again, with the pandemic in 2020, the government also tries to attract investments by providing the tax holiday if certain conditions are met. You can see there's certain amount of investment and what kind of deduction that could be given by the government. This all needs to be asked for. It's not automatic, so you need to apply for it, and the government will review, and the government will give the tax holiday when all conditions are met. The latest one is, this may not be relevant for businesses, but for employees, it's quite a relief. The government is given a one-time payment to employees who earn less than or up to 3.5 million rupiah. That's probably $200, $250 a month. And they will be given a one-time payment of about 600,000 rupiah. It's about 41 or 42 US dollars to them to help with the their purchasing power, to help them be able to buy more things. There are some requirements that need to be met, but this is given by the government. This is the exemption of import duty. Certain import may be exempted from import duty, but you need the types of goods or materials that will be imported would need to be included in the Minister of Finance decree. So we need to look at that. Again, this is not automatic. Will need to be requested for the import duty exemption. Again, with this, the government wishes to improve investment and improve manufacturing production, and in turn would allow companies to go back to where they were before the pandemic. Looking at some numbers here, investments, you look at the trend, it's still an upward trend. Hopefully it will continue to go up. This is just the number of foreign ownership in the our capital markets. The foreign ownership, you can see it is relatively stable at 40, 41, 44% compared to the local, but I don't have more recent figure for this.
Just you should be looking to end your session.
Yes, sustainable development. We do this. We've made revisions to our laws in connection with the sustainable development goals. You can see the 2020-24. We've improved our tax regulations with the job creation law, and more recently harmonization of tax laws. So we've done that, and we've also done the other tax reporting system, sharing of information. Now it's all done in order to meet the sustainable development goals that we've agreed to be a part of. So all is looking good. You may know that the election is coming up in 2024. So it's also political year for us between now until the election. I'm open to questions later on. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Johannes. Our final speaker for today is Mr. Jude Ocampo from the Philippines. He's a partner of Ocampo and Surawo Law Offices in Manila. Mr. Ocampo has an interesting background. Apart from being a Philippine attorney specializing in mergers and acquisition, corporate law, and tax, he also has spent time serving the Philippine government from 2004 to 2005, when he was the Assistant Secretary for Legal Affairs in the Republic's Trade and Industry Department and Finance Department. He's also a corporate and tax lawyer for more than 2 decades experience in Philippines and abroad. He has held senior director and partner positions in several big law firms, four firms in the Philippines, for example, KPMG, Deloitte, and Ernst & Young. Jude, over to you to tell us about the situation in the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And hello to everyone, and I'm happy to have this chance to talk to you about the recovery of the Philippines in the COVID pandemic era. So I hope you can see my slide. As you can see, the topic of my discussion is the Philippine policy agenda, or the implementation of the Philippine policy agenda to accelerate economic recovery. So I'll be dividing my discussion into three. The first one is a discussion on the economic impact of the pandemic. The second is just to show you the 10-point agenda formulated earlier this year, and then some notes on implementation measures. So one thing that needs to be stressed is that prior to the pandemic, the Philippine economy was going along very well. It was averaging between 6 and 7% growth rate for a straight 6 or 7 years. And then the pandemic hit. Admittedly, the management of the government of the pandemic was among the harshest or the most conservative, not just in the region, but in the world. So we experienced a lot of lockdowns. The lockdowns are not citywide, sometimes they're region-wide. So you can imagine Metro Manila is composed of many cities and municipalities. At some point, the whole of Metro Manila was in lockdown. Imagine around 10 to 11 million people unable to leave their houses. And so the impact was tremendously negative. 10.1% of all businesses had to close temporarily. Around 0.4% of them never survived and never came out of the temporary closure. Around $19 billion was the measured loss of household wage and income. And unfortunately, this loss was experienced mostly by our lower income households. And as you can see in the slide, GDP contracted by 9.6%. I think one of the largest contractions of GDP in the region, if not globally. The thing is, when the economic energy was slowly unleashed in 2021, and because of the great fundamentals of the Philippine economy, the recovery immediately started. So you can see there the growth trajectory in 2021. And so the economy started its very good rebound. And as you can see in first quarter of 2022, the Philippines was far and away the leader in the growth rate in the first quarter. As you can see, it was around 8.3%. This is the data from the National Economic Development Authority of the Republic of the Philippines. And so given the, again, the background that the policymakers realized that because we had a good set of fundamentals, economic fundamentals, all that's needed is to go back to the previous state of affairs before the pandemic. And therefore, in March of 2022, the outgoing president of the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte, accepted or adopted the 10-point policy agenda prepared by the National Economic Development Authority. And as you can see here, this is more of an agenda for normalizing economic relations rather than creating a new impetus for the growth, right? And so the first one is strengthening healthcare capacity. Second is accelerating and expanding the vaccination program. There is a bit of hesitation in some parts of our population for this, so there's a lot to be done on the vaccination program. Then there's the reopening of the economy and the public transport capacity, which I will be discussing later. Resuming face-to-face learning, reducing restrictions on domestic and international travel. And then there was a good reception of the population to digital trends during the pandemic, especially digital payments, the use of third-party logistics and delivery providers for even the basic necessities and so on. And then, of course, the rest are still in connection with dealing with the pandemic in the future. So let me focus on these four: reopening the economy, resuming face-to-face learning, relaxing requirements for international travel, and accelerating digital transformation. So the reopening of the economy was very reliant on the expanding the public transport capacity, right? And so what was done really is bit by bit, the transportation franchises, the buses, the trains, we have these vehicles called the jeepneys, were slowly allowed to resume their old routes. And as a matter of fact, the sad thing about it, during the 2021, I could go from my home to my office in 25 minutes. Now it will take me again, just like before, around 1 hour to go from my home to the office. It just really shows that the previous economic activity previous to the pandemic has actually resumed. Then very recently, as you can see from the very first note there, the current president of the Philippines, President Marcos, signed an executive order already allowing people to go about in public areas without face masks. That has, of course, psychological effect in pushing for greater economic activity. The important development actually this year, as you can see in the second column, is the guideline already allowing businesses to operate at 100% capacity. So as I said, we had a lot of very harsh and conservative policies. Previously, there are different ratios allowed, like 50%, only 50% of your workers can go to work and so on, right? But then, even when people were allowed to actually have 100% capacity, the government has become a bit more liberal in allowing work from home arrangements, which
you should be
workers
looking to wrap your session up.
Okay, so let me just go through quickly. There's, again, I said the resumption of face-to-face learning. There is the relaxation of international travel. The notice that foreign travelers need not have a period to quarantine themselves when they come here. And then there's the acceleration of digital transformation support for these kinds of transactions. And finally, just the final note, the economy even opened up more because bigger sections of the economy are now open to foreign investments. These are right now the public service sectors which are limited to Filipino control. So that ends my presentations. If you have any questions, you can send me an email in this email address. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ocampo, for your presentation. I think we have just time for only one question because we have eaten into the Q&A time of 10 minutes. So there's a question in the chat box to Mr. Johannes, Indonesia. When is the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway expected to be completed? Over to you, Johannes. When is the high-speed railway expected to be completed? You are muted, Johannes. Please unmute
Yes,
yourself.
yeah.
Okay.
No, I couldn't unmute. Okay. That's a tough question to answer because initially, as I understand it, it was going to be next year. But again, it got delayed. And the most recent one, and also there's going to be a delay, and also there's the cost overrun, which both Indonesia and China would need to figure out and sort out and decide what to do. So it's not going to be this year for sure. It's not going to be next year. It's more likely the following year.
Okay, thank you, Johannes. We don't have time anymore to answer questions in a live fashion here, but feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, and the speakers of this session will look at your questions and answer accordingly. I will now introduce the moderator of our next session on the latest development of national, regional, and international mechanisms for commercial disputes resolution. Our moderator for session 2 is Dr. Thomas So. He is the past president of the Law Society of Hong Kong and also the current chairman of the Belt and Road Committee of the Law Society of Hong Kong. I will now hand the time over to Dr. Thomas So to take over for session 2. Over to you, Dr. So.
Thank you, Mr. Leung. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Hong Kong, and good day to those coming from different jurisdictions. I'm Thomas So, your moderator for this session. I'm the past president and the chairman of Belt and Road Committee of the Law Society of Hong Kong. In this session, we will look at the latest development of national, regional, and international mechanisms for commercial dispute resolution. Allow me a couple of minutes to introduce to you our distinguished speakers for this afternoon's panel. Our first speaker is Ms. Chi Chen, project manager of the International Commercial Dispute Prevention and Settlement Organization, Secretariat. Ms. Chi is deeply involved in the preparation and operational work of her organization, which is the International Commercial Dispute Prevention and Settlement Organization. The name already tells us all that the organization involved in a lot of commercial dispute resolution work. Ms. Chi has extensive practical experience in the field of international commercial dispute settlement, and today she will talk about how to promote a sustainable recovery of the global economy under the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly with the support and safeguards of the international commercial dispute governance system. Then our second speaker is Mr. Ronald Sum. He is council member of the Law Society of Hong Kong. Mr. Sum is a fellow of the Hong Kong Institute of Arbitrators and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. He is the immediate past chairman of the ICC Arbitration and ADR Subcommittee, and he is also the Council and Appointments Committee member of the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center. Mr. Sum will talk about recent developments on arbitration and mediation in Hong Kong. Then our third speaker is Mr. Kim Pang, chairman of Building and Construction Committee of the Law Society of Singapore. Mr. is a recognized leader in international arbitration in various legal publications. He is also a senior accredited specialist in building and construction law. He will share with us his views this afternoon in the dispute resolution mechanisms established by the key institutions in Singapore and the recent enhancement in the promotion of effective and efficient resolution of international trade and commercial disputes in Singapore. Then we have Dr. Hans Jerelim, partner of Jerelim Partner from Austria. Dr. Jerelim is the president of the Austrian Chinese Legal Society in Austria and founding member of the China-Europe Legal Forum. He was also a member of the Austrian Parliament National Council from 1994 to 2019. Unfortunately, Dr. Gerald Lim today cannot join us, but he will share with us his insights on the current development of arbitration in Europe in the form of a pre-recorded video. Last but not least, we have Mr. Jefei, KC, from the 7BR Barristers Chambers. Mr. is an experienced counsel specializing in commercial litigation and arbitration, with extensive experience appearing before courts and tribunals, as well as sitting as arbitrator in many jurisdictions. Today, he will talk about the future of commercial dispute resolution in the 21st century. And before we hear from our speakers, may I first of all invite our president of the Law Society of Hong Kong, Mr. C.M. Chan, to first have the sponsors' remarks. Mr. Chan.
Thank you, Thomas. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. It is indeed my pleasure joining all of you here today. And thank you again for inviting the Law Society of Hong Kong to support and participate in this meaningful event. Before I give the floor to the speakers, allow me to brief about Hong Kong and the Law Society of Hong Kong generally. Under the principle of one country, two systems, Hong Kong has a well-established legal system firmly based on the rule of law and the independent judiciary. On the one hand, Hong Kong is part of China. On the other hand, Article of the Basic Law, which is our constitutional document, provides that socialist system and policies shall not be practiced in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's previous capitalist system and way of life shall remain unchanged for 50 years after the handover or 2047. You may have noticed that Hong Kong has just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the establishment of our special administrative region. In particular, President Xi Jinping reiterated that the success of the implementation of one country, two systems means that the system should be maintained in the long term and that there is no reason to change. Further, in explaining the direction of the one country, two systems policy, President Xi reassured the importance of maintaining the unique advantages of Hong Kong, including our common law system and the judiciary's exercise of its power independently in accordance with the law. Being the only common law jurisdiction within China, the tried and trusted legal system of Hong Kong is always a cornerstone of our success. The Law Society of Hong Kong was incorporated in 1907, more than 100 years ago. The Law Society is vested with the statutory powers to regulate the professional conduct of all solicitors in Hong Kong. Since the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, we have been playing an active role in promoting Hong Kong's legal system and legal profession along the Belt and Road. Apart from active participation in international and Greater China events, such as today's webinar, one of our pivotal contributions to facilitate connectivity among the Belt and Road jurisdictions is that we have organized an international Belt and Road conference in Hong Kong since 2017, providing an excellent platform to explore opportunities and discuss solutions for challenges under the initiative for the legal profession. We are now planning the 5th Belt and Road Conference on 10th of November 2022. And the topic of this year is Metaverse and Money on the Belt and Road. And I hope you will see many of you in November. Please enjoy the rest of today's webinar and really look forward to seeing you in November, hopefully in person. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Those two topics obviously are the most talked about topic by ordinary people nowadays, money and metaverse. But then, before we embark on that in November, which I very hope that, many of our speakers today could join us, we now have our panels speaking time commencing. And each speaker has 8 minutes to do their presentation. And because of time, I would ask speakers to closely monitor their time. And I will remind you in the last minute or so. Without further ado, can I invite our first speaker, Ms. Chi Chan, Project Manager of the International Commercial Dispute Prevention and Settlement Organization Secretariat, to give us her speech for today. Ms. Chi.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and good morning, good afternoon to all the guests and friends. Greeting to us. I would like to thank you, Law Asia, for inviting me to this webinar. It gives me great pleasure to join you online to discuss and learn from each other. As you said, over the past 2 years, COVID-19 continued to hit and disrupt our lives, and the global economy is now gradually entering a stable recovery in the post-pandemic era. However, behind the positive trend, the divergence of recovery between developed and emerging economies, the rapid mutation of COVID-19, and the uneven distribution of vaccines, the potential local geopolitical risk, triggering international instabilities, and many other challenges cannot be ignored. Against this backdrop, it's of great significance to hold this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you my personal insights and reflections on promoting a sustainable recovery of the global economy. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, and particularly with the support of the International Commercial Dispute Governance System, currently, the worldwide economic recovery is at a critical moment. The growth of international trade is affected by negative factors, such as global economic slowdown, trade protectionism, continuous supply tensions, and geopolitical conflicts. In many aspects, the commercial dispute settlement mechanism of resolution after dispute arise is difficult to meet the governance needs of the commercial dispute for the high-quality development of the Belt and Road Initiative. We should advocate the concept of prevention is better than cure actively, promote the building of a commercial dispute prevention mechanism, and guide and encourage commercial entities to resolve the difference, conflicts, and even disputes as they emerge, avoiding and reducing the escalation of dispute. The dispute prevention has clear upsides over resolution mechanism in the following 3 areas. First, it can effectively reduce the cost of dispute settlement. By predicting the causes and risks of disputes in advance and taking preventive measures, the dispute prevention mechanism can not only greatly reduce the cost of resolving disputes, but also greatly shorten the time of dispute resolution, thereby freeing the parties from the long-term dispute, helping them establish a good reputation and seizing business opportunities to increase benefits. Second, it is conducive to achieving win-win cooperation between the parties. Despite prevention puts the focus of dispute governance ahead of the formation of dispute and prevents dispute from arising or worsening at source, it also contains the Chinese thought of harmony is most precious, which is not only in line with the cooperation concept of the Belt and Road Initiative, but also greatly benefits commercial entities in maintaining partnerships, carrying out follow-up cooperation, and achieving win-win results. Third, the idea of dispute prevention is in line with the trend of sustainable development of the global economy. Compared with the passive and delayed nature of the dispute settlement mechanism, dispute prevention aims to promote more rule of law efforts towards guidance and diversion, early discover potential risks, and enter the governance system as soon as possible, thereby preventing the accumulation of risks from qualitatively transforming into dispute. This mechanism plays a positive role in optimizing resources allocation, facilitating global investment and trade, and promoting the transformation of the global economic to sustainable development. Founded on October 15, 2020, ICD-PASO has been committed to promoting the concept and model of commercial dispute governance, of giving priority to prevention and integrating prevention and resolution, which has achieved international consensus. At present, ICD-PASO has achieved a Category A liaison status to ISO and is actively promoting the establishment of the concept of international commercial dispute prevention in a standardized form and promoting it around the world. At the same time, the NCTRO has also clearly agreed that the concept of dispute prevention is in line with the initial goal of win-win cooperation among market players, and discussed it in depth at the 39th meeting of its Working Group 3. In order to promote sustainable development under the Belt and Road Initiative, and actively explore the development of comprehensive, effective, and low-cost commercial dispute prevention service, I believe that at least the following works should be carried out. In order to obey the time frame, I will just naming the service we provide, and I will be more than happy to discuss with you any person who interested during the Q&A session or maybe after this meeting. First, we should attach the importance of information sharing and early warning. Second, we should assess and improve the building of an effective compliance system. Third, we should respect and protect intellectual property rights. First, we should focus on preliminary due diligence and legal identification. Also, we should promote and use effective standard contract clauses. In addition, ICD-PASO also strives to explore the role and effectiveness of resolving methods, such as organizing professional experts to assist commercial entities to conduct negotiation. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, those who wish to cooperate do not take mountains and seas at the distance. As an international economic cooperation initiative, the Belt and Road reflect a new cooperation concept and cooperation model, aiming to achieve the common development of all countries. Facing the multiple challenges of the global economic recession and the impact of the pandemic, ICD-PASO take various preventive measures to deal with the problem, difference, or dispute of all parties, and achieved a win-win situation through creative dispute prevention measures, which played a positive role in promoting global economic recovery and sustainable development. Just like Law Asia, ICD-PASO is willing to build a platform and provide support for exchanges and cooperation from all walks of life. So that's all my sharing for today, and thank you for your attention.
Sorry, thank you so much, Ms. Chi, for your presentations, very enlightening. Now let us move to our second speaker, Mr. Ronald Shum. Mr. Shum will talk about recent developments on arbitration and mediation in Hong Kong. Ronald, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you for Law Asia for inviting me on this occasion. I'm a council member of the Law Society of Hong Kong. I'm also a partner at Baker McKenzie, Hong Kong as well. Now, because I've got 8 minutes, so I'm going to make this short and succinct. One thing, I've been hearing the past 5 speakers, they're from Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, soon UK, Australia, mainland China, etc. Now, in particular, Mr. Ocampo is saying that now he gets to his office in 1 hour. I was traveling from my home to my office in 15 minutes during the pandemic times, and now also 45 minutes. So why is it so? To me, it is because the economy is picking up. Yes, it's still going through some rough patches, but at least it is coming through. Now, it is part and parcel of any business entities, okay, that they will encounter some sort of disputes, be it the miscommunications or whatever, or misunderstandings. Disputes are there. In a sense, it is good because with more economies, there will be more disputes. So it is important to go and understand what is happening in Hong Kong. Okay, and I will briefly touch on the mainland part as well. Now, I'm going to talk about our arbitrations, which is a form of dispute resolution settlements, which is quite common in this part of town. And of course, I'll talk about mediations and obviously e-hearing, which is very popular in Hong Kong or in Asia at the moment. Now, I'm not going to go through a lot of the things here. It is in a lot more detail than giving the 8 minutes here. Now, interim measures, it is very important why interim measures, because before anyone comments any sort of dispute resolution mechanism, the parties will hope to get some sort of securities. So interim measures becomes very important. Okay. Now, Hong Kong is an arbitration-friendly jurisdiction. So a party simply needs to make an application to court to obtain some sort of interim measure, some sort of securities, or in this method called GM1 and GM2 versus KC, some sort of anti-suit injunction. Okay, to get some form of assurance in at least getting an outcome, a monetary outcome in any of the arbitration proceedings. Now, in particular in Hong Kong, there's been some arrangements. There's got no arrangements because Hong Kong is part of China, a one country, two system, and that's why we call any arrangements, okay, between Hong Kong and China, as we say, arrangements. Now, there's this new mutual assistance arrangements between Hong Kong and the mainland concerning court-ordered interim measures. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that if you are making an application in Hong Kong, under certain of the arbitration institutions, you will get some sort of property preservations, evidence preservations, conduct preservations, in more common law language, some sort of injunctions. Okay. Now the same applies when there is a mainland arbitration commenced, being enforce or obtaining some sort of interim measures in Hong Kong. Now, as I said, if it is a mainland arbitration seeking some sort of interim measures in Hong Kong, it will be by way of a Marival urgent injunction relief, anti-suit injunctions, as in the GM1, GM2 case, prohibition orders, and 10-pillar orders. And of course, Hong Kong, as I said, it's an arbitration-friendly, very arbitration-friendly jurisdictions, a signatory of the New York Conventions, previously with UK, now with the mainland. And of course, once again, there's the arrangements, the mutual enforcement of arbitral awards between Hong Kong and the mainland. And I'll briefly explain here the mechanism involved in any New York Convention enforcement of arbitral awards proceedings. As you can see, 167 contracting states, many of the Belt and Road jurisdictions, I like to call them jurisdictions, are signatories to the New York Conventions, no appeal mechanism, and that's why it is so popular in the world at the moment. You finish the case and with a properly constituted tribunal, you settle the matter. Okay, that's the New York Convention. Of more interesting part, it's the 2021. Let me just about 2021, 2020. What we call the supplemental arrangements concerning the mutual enforcement of arbitral awards between the mainland and Hong Kong. Okay, now this first legislation came out in 1999. When at that stage arbitration was not overly popular, I would say, as compared to now. So a lot of the mechanism from this old legislation does not quite fit well into the international scene at the moment. So our previous Secretary for Justice, Ms. Teresa Chang, SC, who is an expert on arbitration, decided to upgrade this old legislation into more in line with the international standards. Okay, and it has attracted popularities in that respect. A lot of the misunderstanding of the old law has been removed. For example, in the last line, previously there cannot be simultaneous enforcement of awards outside the mainland. Now it can be done. Now, hot off the press is something called I actually can't pronounce it. It's called OFSA, as we call it. What is OFSA? It's outcome-related fee structures for arbitration. Now, it's the full name is called Arbitration Outcome-related fee structures for arbitration rules. That is not yet enforced. It is also in public consultations. I mean, the Hong Kong Law Society have been asked to provide their comments on it. There will be workshops for this new law. Our current president, Mr. Chen, Mr. CM Chen, CM is actually in the consultation working committees. So as OFSA, as the name says, I think everyone can guess what it means. Okay, now law firms can charge on an outcome-related fee structures during arbitrations. It's not yet applicable to mediations, which I'm going to talk about very soon. In this OFSA rules, there will be the OFSA agreements. There will be a number of conditions to be met. For example, how do you operate this agreements? How do you enforce the agreements? How do you even terminate any sort of outcome-related fee structure for arbitration during the arbitration? So just keep an eye out, because I understand that many of our neighbors already have similar type of structures. I think the OFSA in Hong Kong is actually very welcome by the arbitration community and by our neighbors in that respect. Now, of course, the next thing is mediation. Now, mediation is actually one of the drive.
Sorry, Ronald. Your time is almost up. Can you wrap up quickly? Sorry.
Okay. Now, so I'll just give you some pictures of the integrated office. Now, I look at one question from the chat box. It talks about many people talk about investor-state arbitration. Maybe investor-state mediation is the way to go. Okay, Hong Kong every year has this working group 3 on mediation. Now, final slides, give me 1 minute or so. Okay, it's the online. Everyone now is used to everything is online, whether it is banking, whether it is dispute resolutions. I must thank EBRAM, Electronic Business-Related Arbitration and Mediation, in providing me with the slides. Being a lazy me, when I talk about mediation, it is the Hong Kong very own EBRAM. It provides mediation, it provides arbitration, in short, with everything online. It provides a one-stop shop for dispute resolutions. Now, of course, the EBRAM, it's denominated APAC, ODR platforms. As you can see there, it has got other facilities, e-signatures, video conferencing, and of course, Hong Kong Legal Cloud, which online arbitration as well. Now, it is an APAC platform. As I said, APAC has nominated EBRAM as one of the online platforms. It's very user-friendly. It goes through negotiations, mediations, or arbitrations all in one go. Why arbitration is so popular? Because it is fast. There's no appeal procedures. The same applies for online of this EBRAM platform. As I mentioned, interim measures before you finish your proceedings, you can get some sort of injunctions, interim measures. I mentioned previously there were 6 institutions. EBRAM is one of them. It is cost-effective. Being a lawyer for nearly 30 years, you don't have to travel. I traveled around the world to conduct arbitrations. Now everything is online. Once again, being a lazy myself, I prefer to do it in front of the camera like now. It is very efficient, not time-consuming, and cost-effective.
Okay. Ronald, you need to wrap up. Sorry, Ronald.
Okay. Now, if anyone wants to get a copy, you can ask the organizers. This is the code for the EBRAM platform. So thank you very much. My apologies for going over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Thank you. Thank you. Now let us move on to Mr. Kim Pang, Chairman of Building and Construction Committee of the Law Society of Singapore. He will talk about the situation in Singapore. Mr. the time is yours.
Thank you. A big hello to everyone and a good afternoon from Singapore. Singapore was one of the first countries to publicly express support for the Belt Road Initiative and has continued to be a strong proponent of the project. The World Bank's Doing Business 2020 report found that Singapore had the shortest resolution time worldwide for standardized commercial disputes, and this is at 120 days. The Doing Business 2020 report also ranked Singapore as the best country out of 190 countries on the ease of enforcing contracts. Singapore offers a neutral third-party venue for BRI countries and companies to resolve commercial disputes quickly and effectively. 2 of the most popular mechanisms for dispute resolution are widely promoted. First, arbitration. Singapore is widely recognized as an arbitration-friendly jurisdiction. The arbitration regime is based on the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, or UNCITRAL model law, and disputes are generally arbitrable unless the subject matter of the dispute is considered contrary to public policy. Singapore is also a signatory to the Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards, or the New York Convention, and this means that arbitral awards made in Singapore can be readily enforced in other contracting states of the New York Convention. And as you just heard from the earlier speaker, there are to date 167 states or contracting states of the New York Convention. Secondly, mediation. Mediation in Singapore is actively promoted by the judiciary and by the Singapore government. Mediation as a dispute resolution process is also set to grow exponentially following the entry into force in September 2020 of the United Nations International Convention on Settlement Agreements for Mediation, or what is now called the Singapore Convention for shorthand. This convention seeks to assist global businesses in resolving cross-border disputes by way of mediation and making it possible for them to apply directly to the courts for enforcement in countries that have ratified the convention. So far, 55 nations across the world have signed the Singapore Convention, including China, United States, and India. BRI disputes can be efficiently resolved in Singapore through 3 principal institutional mechanisms. 1, through litigation in the Singapore courts via the Singapore International Commercial Court, or the SICC. 2, through arbitration under the auspices of the Singapore International Arbitration, the SIAC. Or 3, through mediation by the Singapore International Mediation Center, the SIMC. Using a combination of these mechanisms, such as the UP-MET-UP process promoted by the SIMC, is also popular and enhances effective dispute resolution. A few more words about each of these institutions. The SICC was established to deal with transnational commercial disputes and is part of the General Division of the Supreme Court of Singapore. It comprises of world-renowned judges across several jurisdictions. In November 2021, the SICC established a technology, infrastructure, and construction list, which deals with cases involving technically complex issues such as building and construction disputes, engineering disputes, and claims relating to the supply of goods or services for technology, infrastructure, and construction projects. A case placed in a TIC list will benefit from additional case management features suited to the expeditious resolution of technically complex disputes, as such disputes usually involve many contracts and also multiple parties with voluminous evidence to be considered. And in 2021, December of 2021, the SICC amended its procedural rules to enhance the dispute resolution process in that forum. Now, turning to arbitration, over the last 3 decades, the Singapore International Arbitration Center has firmly established itself as a premier global dispute resolution center. The SIC has been ranked as the most preferred arbitral institution in Asia Pacific and placed among the world's top arbitral institutions in the 2021 Queen Mary Survey on International Arbitration. Singapore now ties with London as the place most favored by global businesses to arbitrate. Turning to mediation, SIMC's panel of mediators cater to several jurisdictions, both common and civil law. And in January 2019, a memorandum of understanding was signed between SIMC and the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade to jointly develop the rules and procedures for disputes submitted to mediation and establish a panel of mediators to resolve disputes arising out of the BRI projects. For trade and maritime, the SCMA is a specialist arbitral institution that caters to the maritime and international trade industry. And recently, the SCMA also launched its new edition of arbitration rules. Key changes to the rules include conducting arbitrations through electronic and digital means and ensuring greater transparency in the appointment of arbitrators. Now, adding to the host of dispute resolution services on offer, in October 2018, the Singapore Ministry of Law launched the Singapore Infrastructure Dispute Management Protocol, or what is known as the SIDP in shorthand. And this is to assist parties involved in mega infrastructure projects to manage disputes and to minimize risks of time and costs overruns. One of the SIDP's main features is the involvement of a disputes board, which is appointed at the start of a project and remains in place for its duration, akin to the disputes board or the DAB previously under the FIDIC form of contract. Depending upon the complexity of the project, the DB may comprise of experts and its members may be selected by the parties or appointed by a designated authority such as the SIMC. And the main aim of the DB is to help the parties avoid disputes and to resolve them as and when they arise, which is a point I believe a lot in the audience would appreciate is perhaps particularly vital in complex infrastructure projects where durations run for years. Singapore continually reviews its laws and regulations to ensure that they promote dispute resolution as efficiently and effectively as possible. The procedural rules for litigation in Singapore recently underwent a major overhaul. In April 2022, reforms were introduced to modernize the litigation process, enhance the efficiency and speed of adjudication, and maintain costs at reasonable levels. There are 5 ideals which these new procedural rules aim to achieve. First, fair access to justice. Second, expeditious proceedings. Third, cost-effective work proportionate to a number of considerations, including the nature and importance of the action, the complexity of the claim, and the difficulty and novelty of the issues and questions it raises, the amount or value of the claim, the efficient use of court resources, and fair and practical results suited to the needs of the parties. These changes make the courts in Singapore more accessible and further strengthen Singapore as a dispute resolution hub. The second Singapore-China International Commercial Dispute Resolution Conference was held on 7 April 2022, and the discussions at this conference reaffirmed that the relevant legal institutions in Singapore will further strengthen the cooperation between the nations and deepen and expand their investment and trade exchanges. In conclusion, I hope that the points that I've highlighted underscore and highlight the interest, the keen interest by the Singapore government and those of us in Singapore to strongly promote Singapore as a center for and a hub for dispute resolution services. And some of the changes that have been recently introduced are certainly geared towards appealing to the stakeholders in the BRI project. Thank you for listening to me, and with that, I conclude my remarks.
Thank you so much, Mr. For your presentation. We now move on to our next speaker, Dr. Gerald Lim. I believe we have a set of video that Dr. Gerald Lim has pre-recorded. Maybe we'll play that for everyone.
say in the Italian mountains. I've taken the task to report about current developments of arbitration in Europe. This form of dispute resolution, which is so important, especially for business and corporations, continues to enjoy increasing popularity with a lot of competition between locations for institutionalized arbitration, which are in Europe, for example, Zurich, Paris, Stockholm, and Vienna. There's no doubt that intensive arbitration activities can also be an economic factor for the respective region and can also lead to corresponding know-how clusters if universities are involved. In order to attractive Austria as a location for arbitration, we have ensured for amendment of our arbitration law that in the case of appeals against arbitral awards, a Senate specially established in the Austrian Supreme Court, which can quickly and competently resolve decisions on the question referred to it. Compared to the classic jurisdiction in courts, the several major advantages of arbitration are evident, especially in international transactions. A high degree of procedural flexibility. For example, the parties can choose the place of the hearing, the arbitrator, the applicable law, and the language of the proceeding themselves. Procedural efficiency. Usually only one comprehensive oral hearing and only very limited possibilities to appeal lead to quick results. Multi-party proceedings are possible, and confidentiality. The public is excluded from the proceedings, and strict confidentiality usually applies to parties and arbitrators. This protects trade secrets and sensitive information from the public media and competitors. There is no possibility for persons outside the proceedings to inspect files. Arbitral awards are enforceable almost worldwide, while state judgments outside the EU are enforceable only under existing agreements. What are the current issues in Europe? Over the past decades, EU has not only steadily expanded its borders geographically by admitting new member states, but by virtue of transfer of powers from its member states to the EU. It has gradually acquired also far-reaching legislative powers. This also concerns the area of civil jurisdiction and its harmonization in EU. On this basis, civil procedure law for member states has been comprehensively regulated by European legislative acts. Uniform jurisdiction rules for civil courts have considerably strengthened the internal market, and building on this, made cross-border free movement of judgments possible. Arbitration, on the other hand, which is eminently important for commercial disputes in particular, has been excluded from the scope of these regulations from the very beginning. In order to be effective, private arbitration would require the support of civil courts due to the lack of its own sovereign rights, because a completely independent coexistence of the two types of proceeding does not exist up till now. Rather, it is in the interest of both institutions that their respective functions could be so effectively as possible. From the point of view of civil courts, arbitration means a considerable relief, since arbitration proceedings mostly are dealing with very complex commercial disputes. From the point of view of arbitration, there's a lot of advantages already been mentioned before. Due to the fundamentally different nature of the two dispute resolution mechanisms, court proceedings, arbitration, the still existing exclusion of arbitration from the current legislative regulations of the EU for civil court proceedings is not implausible. However, this finally requires a corresponding equivalent regulatory framework for arbitration proceedings. The New York UN Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards of 1958, the UNC, had already been standardized with virtue far beyond the borders of the EU, and long before the EU started harmonization of procedure law. However, the scope of UNC for arbitration is essentially limited to ex post control and thus does not cover important parts of arbitration law. At the same time, international arbitration in particular benefits from comprehensive legal uniformity for cross-border disputes and should meet all requirements to satisfy parties involved from different jurisdictions. This was already quite clear for the EU members when the European norms for judicial civil procedure were created. But it was assumed that the international arbitration law would be governed by a separate set of rules at the European level. Decades later, however, this is still not the case. Rather, in the meantime, the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, UNCITRAL, has successfully advanced the harmonization of arbitration law and another level by adopting the model law of international commercial arbitration, thus considerably strengthening this area. Central problem is the possible emergence of parallel proceedings before an arbitral tribunal at the one side and the civil court at the other side, which illustrates particularly well the deficient interaction of national arbitration law within the EU. But this is not especially what the European law concerns. This problem occurs also in other parts of the world. However, the problem takes on an additional dimension in the EU as a result of the current enforcement regime, since in the case of conflicting decisions, civil court, arbitration, the question arises whether the arbitral award or the court judgment should prevail. So the work of the European institutions on harmonization is still underway. And that's good because an essential question is the safeguarding of union law in the context of arbitration proceedings. Why? Legal acts of the EU can amend, supplement, or completely replace the law of the member states. The European Court of Justice therefore requires arbitral tribunals to apply union law. The first challenge for an arbitral tribunal is to find out which norms of union law must necessarily, obligatorily applying, and which norms it merely needs to examine when the parties invoke them. Currently, the discussion is focusing in particular on the question of which provisions of the EU treaties, regulations, and directives are so important that their violation can be regarded as a breach of order public, which an arbitral tribunal must in any case prevent. Examples include European competition and state aid law, as well as other regulations central to the free internal market, such as consumer protection. Once an arbitral tribunal has identified the relevant problem on the union law and taken the necessary evidence, it must ask itself to what extent it is bound by the decision of EU or member states authorities. Unlike civil courts, arbitral tribunals are not embedded in any jurisdictional system, so that the question of binding effect can hardly be satisfactorily resolved in general terms. Arbitral tribunals and state authorities can therefore arrive at different results when applying union law. Eliminating the result legal uncertainty will be the task of the current legal development within the coming years. One problem in this context is that arbitral tribunals are precluded from the referring question of union law to the European Court of Justice for preliminary rulings before making an arbitral award. The preliminary ruling procedure of the EC jury of the European Court of Justice in ongoing proceeding for the interpretation of a question relevant under European law is one of the central institutions for the harmonization of European law. Here the court declares with binding effect how a legal question is to be interpreted. Also, such preliminary ruling procedures could increase the duration of arbitration proceeding They could significantly increase legal certainty. If a proper regulation could not be installed within the next future, a workable solution could be for law member states to oblige their courts to submit questions of law to the court for preliminary rulings at the request of an arbitral tribunal. This would result in significant savings in time and cost for the parties to arbitration proceedings compared to the current legal situation. Currently, an arbitral award can only be reviewed for its compatibility with union law if the losing party challenges the award or its enforceability before a civil court, for example, on the grounds of violation of order public policy. As already mentioned, the preliminary ruling procedures are of great importance. That has been shown just recently through a few significant decisions of the EU Court of Justice, especially in investment protection proceedings as follows. Mere ruling of the European Court. After Slovakia liberalized its healthcare system, it was sued by the Dutch Achmea holding for damages of 22 million euros. Achmea has made its business from the sale of private health insurance and considered itself disadvantaged by the Slovak state's liberalization law on healthcare. In the March 2018 ruling, a European Court of Justice found the bilateral investment protection agreement between EU states are not compatible with EU law because they lack the possibility of a preliminary ruling procedure. In the view of the court, this prevents the full effectiveness of EU law from being guaranteed in the event of dispute resolutions by arbitral tribunals. The second decision was the PL Holdings versus Poland on October 26, 2021. Here, the court further developed its previously mentioned point of view according to the Achmea judgment. The basis was an investment agreement concluded in 1987 between Belgium and Luxembourg on the one hand and Poland on the other. The investor filed a lawsuit because of, in his opinion, hostile actions against the investor. 2 arbitration awards and the appeal judgment had been ruled in favor of Luxembourg company. The Court of Appeal stated that the arbitration clause in the investment agreement was invalid, but that the member state or investor was free to conclude an ad hoc arbitration agreement with the same content as the arbitration clause in the investment, what had been done. The court countered that this was a circumvention of the prohibition not to agree on arbitration within investment protection agreements and ruled that the
All right, okay, we are back. Unfortunately, we have to cut the video short because of the time. I think the video has gone a bit too far in terms of time, that we allow 8 minutes for each speaker. I think at the time, I think probably the videotape was recorded for too long. Anyway, we now still have time, so let us move on to our last but not least speaker, Mr. Jaffe KC, King's Counsel. He will talk about the future of commercial dispute resolution in the 21st century. Mr. The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon, morning, good evening, wherever in the world you are joining us. It is my great pleasure and honor to distill what the previous speakers have spoken about and to weave it into my presentation, which will focus on the future of commercial dispute resolution in the 21st century. In particular, what I'd like to focus on in the course of my presentation is the 5 pillars of what I regard as the basis for a modern international commercial dispute resolution system, especially in the post-pandemic era. We have had the benefit over the course of the past hour and a half or so of listening to some brilliant and insightful presentations from speakers and panelists from different jurisdictions across the Belt and Road network, who have regaled us with their stories, updates, and reports of the development of not just their commercial dispute resolution systems, but also their economies, particularly in the post-pandemic era. I have also followed with great interest the discussion in the chat box amongst the panelists and other attendees, much of which is focused on, amongst other things, investor-state disputes, and also disputes of an international commercial nature. So the question is, tacking away from a jurisdiction-specific approach, what are the 5 pillars of a modern international commercial dispute resolution system in the 21st century? There is a bit of crystal ball gazing on my part, but to my mind, the 5 pillars are as follows. The first of which is the emergence, even before the pandemic, but having become increasingly important in the post-pandemic era, of specially dedicated hearing centers, especially ones which are focused on arbitration. To that end, I would like to cite 4 examples of what I consider as specially dedicated hearing centers, which are future-proofed to meet the needs of end users of commercial dispute resolution services. There is, of course, in London, in the United Kingdom, the recently launched International Dispute Resolution Center, IDRC, in St. Paul's. There is in Singapore, the long stalwart of international modern dispute resolution hearing centers, namely Maxwell Chambers. The HKIAC, the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center, again, has had for a long time modern and well-equipped, specially dedicated hearing facilities right in the heart of the city. And then again, in recent times, there has been the SCIA. This is the Shenzhen Court of International Arbitration, International Arbitration Tower, which is the latest entrant into what I consider to be the world of specially dedicated hearing centers. The importance of having specially dedicated hearing centers is underscored by the fact that there is and will be an increase in hybrid and virtual hearings, much of which can be effectively channeled through specially dedicated hearing centers which are equipped to deal with hearings of this kind. However, the hardware is not all that is required in order to ensure we have a fit-for-purpose commercial dispute resolution system in the 21st century. The second pillar of my 5-fold rubric of what I consider to be a key aspect of a modern commercial dispute resolution system is the ability to ensure that arbitral decisions are open to scrutiny, albeit limited scrutiny. In that regard, I'd like to highlight the different approaches of 2 jurisdictions along the Belt and Road network. On the one hand, you have here in England, the English approach, which is enshrined in Section 69 of the 1996 Arbitration Act, which allows appeals on points of English law, but subject to thresholds in which permission must first be sought from the curial courts, namely the English courts, before an appeal on a question of English law can proceed. Parties can, of course, opt out from the appeal mechanism. Perhaps underscoring the increasing popularity of some degree of scrutiny, albeit limited scrutiny, Singapore has of late proposed amendments to its arbitration legislation so as to allow an opt-in appeal mechanism where parties can agree to opt into judicial scrutiny at an appellate level of any arbitral awards. The third pillar of my fivefold rubric of what constitutes an important and future-proof commercial dispute resolution system is the increasing importance of mediation, not just as a standalone dispute resolution product, but also in conjunction with other more traditional forms of dispute resolution, whether they are arbitration or court-based litigation. In that regard, Singapore is one of the jurisdictions that has taken great strides in promoting the use of effective mediation, leading the way with the introduction of the Singapore Mediation Convention, which has now been signed by an increasing number of states, and will no doubt be an important cornerstone of the dispute resolution framework that we will be using in years to come. The fourth pillar, again, tacking away perhaps slightly from the hardware and the legislation of it all, is enriching the diversity in arbitration. There is an increasing importance to ensure that those of us who participate in the dispute resolution process, including but not limited to arbitration, are more diverse in terms of our representation, whether it is gender diversity or more latterly regional diversity. That will ensure that the dispute resolution system that is used in the 21st century is more broadly and accurately reflective of the composition of its end users, particularly in circumstances where the epicenter of the world economy is tacking gradually but decisively eastwards. Fifth, the renaissance of commercial courts. It's not just all about arbitration. And we have seen of late a surge in increase in interest in the use of international commercial courts for resolving disputes, leading the way being the Singapore International Commercial Court and even the English Commercial Court. So, Mr. So, my 8 minutes are up. That is a whistle-stop tour of a multi-jurisdictional approach to what I consider to be the 5 key pillars of a modern commercial dispute resolution system in the 21st century, particularly in the post-pandemic era. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. for your presentation. We now have our Q&A session, but looking at the time, unfortunately, we need to close at 4:40, and we need to allow 3 minutes for the closing remark. So I think we only have time for one question for all the speakers to participate. And I was looking at the chat box. I think that there is one question which is very interesting that I would like to hear views from all members of the panel from your own jurisdiction as to what involvement of diplomacy, I believe someone raised this question, in the resolution of international commercial dispute arena. So what is the, how do you see this? You know, would it involve diplomacy, and if so, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Maybe I'll ask our first speaker for her views first. Ms. Chi. Ms. Chi, what do you think about this?
Thank you. I may check this out an interesting, wonderful and but a little trick question for this because from my own perspective, I think the diplomacy and maybe other unjudicial and maybe dispute is in different layer of our question, and I think it would be better to not mix them together, but to think isolated them and just deal with one by one. And I believe that every country's diplomacy policy or maybe some rules is to promote business transaction, especially for the international business. And that's all my for today. That's just for now.
Thank you. Mr. Ronald Sum, do you have any views on this issue?
Yes, I do. I think it should be promoted, if you ask me. The reason is that if you look at the exit arbitration or the investment agreements, I would say more correctly, usually there will be the cooling off period. Sometimes there will be the mediation involved, or sometimes negotiation involved. And I don't think any entities are doing litigation for fun or doing any dispute for fun. So the more layers you add in to promote the settlement of disputes, be it mediation, be it diplomacy, the better. That's my view. Thank you.
Mr. Kim Pang, you have any views on this item? Sorry, Mr. Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself. I think that there is already a degree of diplomacy that happens on the sites, particularly when it involves the larger infrastructure disputes. But I do think that in order to preserve the sanctity of the dispute resolution process, the efforts on diplomacy would have to cease once the formal dispute resolution proceedings go through their paces in the different dispute resolution forum and through the different dispute resolution mechanisms that we've heard our speakers talk about. Thank you, Mr. So.
Thank you. Mr. Mjefei, you have any views? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Mr. So. I just want to say I agree entirely with Ronald. And he adverts to an excellent manifestation of that in the ICSID context. Just to supplement what Ronald says, in an international commercial dispute context, we are seeing that with the proliferation, and I use that word quite deliberately, of tiered dispute resolution clauses. And I am reminded in that regard of the very recent decision of the Hong Kong Court of Appeal in a case called C&D, about not just the importance of tiered dispute resolution clauses, which include a negotiation or a mediation tier prior to the commencement of proceedings and its importance. I'm also reminded that in an earlier decision of the Singapore Court of Appeal in a case, which I think off the top of my head is called International Research Corporation and Lufthansa, which I think is a 2014 decision, where the Singapore Court of Appeal emphasized the fact that to negotiate is the Asian way of resolving disputes, a preferably Asian way of resolving disputes. It is important, particularly again, that the geographical epicenter of the world economy and of disputes is moving eastwards and is becoming more Asian in complexion, that we take on these tiers of diplomacy, whether you call them tiered dispute resolution or otherwise, and embed it in our commercial dispute resolution system.
Thank you so much, Mr. Because of time, I think I need to close our session, our panel discussion and the Q&A session. And now the time is for our Mr. Yin to do his closing remark. Mr. Yin.
Thank you, Mr. So. At the end of this webinar, I would like to express my great thanks to all the speakers who shared with us most valuable insights and information. And I would like to thank all the moderators, our supporting organizations, and sponsors, without whose support, this webinar cannot be so successful. And I would also like to thank the working staff of the Law Asia Secretariat, of my colleagues with the China Law Society Overseas Liaison Development Office, and also the working staff of our supporting organizations, without whose hard work this webinar cannot be possible. And I would also like to say a few words about the theme of this webinar. And I believe that there's this great potential to achieve the synergy and complementary between the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals and the Belt and Road Project objectives. In 2019, the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the second Belt and Road Summit Forum reiterated the shared resolve to make support for the United Nations 2030 agenda an integral part of the Belt and Road Cooperation, and to pursue economic growth, social progress, and environmental protection in a balanced way. And his idea is echoed by the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, who attended the same summit forum, also agreed to the important space where green principles can be reflected in green action. And he suggested the world need to make use of the Belt and Road Initiative to help close significant financing gaps in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And he said the United Nations is poised to make the most of the opportunities of this large-scale initiative for maximum sustainable development dividends. So at the same forum, the Belt and Road Initiative International Green Development Coalition was launched, which has now over 150 partners, including at least 26 environmental ministries of United Nations member states, as well as a lot of United Nations organizations. And 2 years later, the initiative for Belt and Road Partnership on Green Development was jointly launched by over 30 Belt and Road countries. And under this initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative projects could see an enhanced emphasis on preventing and managing environmental risks in infrastructure building. And I also agree that the Belt and Road Initiative projects directly contribute to sustainable development goals in terms of GDP and employment increase, capacity building, and poverty relief. For example, the Nairobi-Mombasa Railway in Kenya was finished in 2017. It has now resulted in an increase of the national GDP of 1.5% in Kenya, an increase of 50,000 workers in terms of employment in the industrial trade, and a big number of technical staff was trained. Over 1,700 technical staff was trained. Some of them got training in China. A report from the World Bank in 2019 estimates that the comprehensive implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative can help lift 7.6 million people out of extreme poverty and 32 million people out of moderate poverty, and increase the trade volume of global and Belt and Road economies by up to 6.2% and 90.7% respectively, and increasing global income by up to 2.9%. We should also, I think, we also take care to some basic principles that need to be complied with. 2 days ago, Mr. Xi Jinping attended the meeting of the Council of the Heads of the Shanghai Cooperation member states in Kyrgyzstan, and he reiterated the principles of mutual trust, mutual benefit, win-win cooperation, equality between nations, consultation, openness and inclusiveness, respect for cultural diversity, and the pursuit of common development. I think these principles are applied in Shanghai Organization member states and are also applied with the Belt and Road Initiative projects, and it should also be complied with for our efforts to achieve the goal for the Sustainable Development Goals as a whole throughout the whole world. Thank you so much. Finally, I believe my partner, co-chair of the Belt and Road Committee of Malaysia, Mr. Jeff Liang, just have a few words to say if Mr. So agreed. Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yin, for your closing remarks. I would like to just take this opportunity to invite all of you, those of you who are new to Law Asia, to consider joining Law Asia as members. We have been around for many years, serving many jurisdictions in various issues from human rights to economic development, all through the years from 1966. So we have our annual conference this year in Sydney from the 18th of November to the 20th of November. I personally will run another session on RCEP, Regional Economic Partnership Agreement, and how it's being implemented. I think the world has too many problems now. Somebody needs to work, and I hope that the member countries of RCEP will work together to grow our economies and lift our people out of the economic difficulties of the pandemic. We need to work. So I hope to see all of you there. Welcome to join us at the Law Asia Annual Conference. Thank you. So
Thank
I
you
think,
very much.
yeah.
Thank you all. And I would also like to thank all the participants who signed up and attend this webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. 等他们先退吧，我们在最后退。150人。